Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail for the wild, mildly suspicious, and surprisingly soggy world of the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. You know, the one your high school teacher called the world's first megacorporation but forgot to mention was basically the Amazon Prime of the 17th century. If Amazon sometimes invaded Indonesia and the customer reviews were written with muskets, before we dip a toe into these brackish colonial waters, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment, but only if you genuinely enjoy this sort of content. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soothing nautical white noise, and get comfortable. Bonus points if you're lying on something harder than your mattress, just to get in the VOC spirit. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what life was actually like for the poor souls who worked for the VOC? How did they survive months on a ship with diet plans designed by someone who hates teeth? Did anyone ever wash their underwear? Or did the breeze do all the work? Was the average day mostly trading spices, or more like, please, not another tropical disease? And could you make it through a month in Batavia without regretting every career choice since birth? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1664, halfway between Amsterdam and Java. You're technically an employee of the world's richest corporation. But mostly, you're just a sunburnt, unwashed, and deeply confused cog in the world's first global supply chain. Good luck. You open your eyes to the sound of creaking wood, snoring men, and the faint aroma of moldy biscuit mixed with desperation. It's dawn aboard a VOC ship, which means another day in your floating wooden prison. Congratulations, you're alive and probably already itchy. Let's set the scene. You're lying in your hammock, which is the VOC's generous way of saying canvas sack strung between two beams directly above a man who hasn't washed in weeks. If you're lucky, your hammock is still dry. If you're less lucky, someone above you sneezed in their sleep and you're getting a complimentary wake-up shower. If you're truly unlucky, the ship hit a swell overnight, and you've rolled out and landed face first in the communal foot-smelling section of the lower deck. Welcome to the world's least exclusive spa. The air down here is thick, not with oxygen, but with a cocktail of sweat, mildew, and lingering pipe smoke, laced delicately with the aroma of salted fish that's been dead longer than most of the crew's hopes. Every breath is a gentle reminder that you are, in fact, not in a wellness retreat. Your lungs beg for fresh air, but the only breeze you'll find is if someone nearby shifts their blanket, releasing a new vintage of Eau de Sailor. Sunlight, that warm, life-giving force you remember from your childhood, does not reach the lower deck. Instead, the only light comes from a handful of lanterns that throw more shadow than illumination, casting dramatic, haunted house vibes over a room full of grown men trying to scratch without making eye contact. If you're feeling optimistic, you can look at the beams above and pretend the groaning is the ship talking to you, rather than the sound of 1,000 loose nails reconsidering their life choices. Getting up is its own physical challenge. The hammocks sway with the rhythm of the ship, so you have to perform an awkward gymnastic maneuver to roll out without kneeing your neighbor or dumping yourself into a barrel of pickled turnips. There is no privacy. The entire process is public, your morning routine performed before an audience of similarly disheveled men. Forget about modesty. That concept was thrown overboard somewhere in the Bay of Biscay. Your first steps are sticky. That's not a metaphor. The deck has been washed, once, possibly during the reign of a previous monarch, and now boasts a unique combination of brine, tar, spilled beer, and whatever the ship's cat decided to contribute last night. You slip, you slide, and you pray you don't lose a toe. Your shoes, if you have any left, are just as confused as you are about the concept of waterproofing. The noise is a symphony. A few men muttering Dutch curses as they untangle themselves from hammocks, the crack of joints that haven't moved in hours, and the wet hacking cough that is the official morning greeting of the lower decks. Somewhere, a rooster crows, either a hallucination or someone's idea of a cruel joke. A rat scurries by with more confidence than you'll muster all week. Breakfast is a distant dream. Before you can think about food, you have to present yourself on deck for roll call, which is less about accountability and more about checking who hasn't died of dysentery in the night. You brush the straw out of your hair. Yes, the ship has straw, but don't ask where it came from, and join the parade of sallow faces blinking against the harsh dawn. And just as you're starting to feel human, a wave slaps the hull, tilting the world at an angle only a Dutch architect could love. You grab at a beam, curse the captain's sense of direction, and wonder if your entire life is now just a sequence of falling sideways and apologizing to people with scurvy. But hey, at least you woke up. You made it through another night without being rolled overboard by a snoring bunkmate or claimed by the world's angriest flea colony. Shipboard mornings are not glamorous, but they are, in their own way, the truest test of human resilience. If you can wake up, scratch yourself, and still find a reason to laugh, you're already winning at VOC life. And if not, well, there's always tomorrow. Same hammock, same smells, and the same desperate hope that someday, somehow, you'll see land and remember what a real sunrise looks like. Until then, the belly of the beast is your new address. Enjoy the view. You survived the night in your swinging hammock, dodged the bucket brigade, and somehow managed not to get trampled by a panicked goat on the lower deck. Congratulations! It's time for the most important meal of the day. Breakfast on a VOC ship. Lower your expectations accordingly. Breakfast is announced by the quartermaster's bellow, an invitation that sounds more like a threat. You and your fellow crewmates shuffle toward the galley, blinking under lanterns and wiping sleep, or possibly mildew, from your faces. If you're picturing fresh eggs, flaky pastries, or even a hint of something edible, I regret to inform you that you're about to meet the lowest common denominator of culinary ambition: salt meat, biscuit, and a side order of existential crisis. Let's start with the main event, the infamous ship's biscuit. Calling it bread is like calling a rock a pillow. Ship's biscuit is flour, water, and salt, baked until it's achieved a density once classified as a geological curiosity. It's been prepared months in advance, then left to mature in the hold until it is almost, but not quite, indistinguishable from the barrel that stores it. Some sailors swear the barrel tastes better. You thump it on the table, check for visible insects, and then check for invisible ones. It's a snack and a biology experiment all in one. But what about the salt meat? It's meat in the same way that jerky is meat, if jerky hated you and wanted you to suffer. Usually beef or pork, sometimes so brined and aged that the only way to eat it is to soak it for an hour and hope it loses the will to fight. More often, it's just gnawed on like a dog with a grudge. The taste is overpoweringly salty, chewy, and faintly reminiscent of that time you accidentally licked a battery as a child. The best part? There are bones. Always bones. You learn to chew thoughtfully and keep your dentist, who is also your barber, your surgeon, and your best hope for living to payday, on speed dial. Now for the beverage. You're offered something called small beer, which is not small, nor is it particularly beer. Think of it as weak, lukewarm, slightly cloudy, and almost certainly safer than the water. Nobody drinks water by choice. The barrels are refilled only when the rain comes, and on days when the water runs low, you get a reminder of why everyone who survives a voyage has kidneys of steel and a suspicious look in their eye. Eating breakfast is a group activity, which is to say, there is no privacy. You find a spot on the bench or squat on a crate, shoulder to shoulder with your equally unwashed colleagues. Conversation is limited. Most are busy calculating whether they'd rather eat the biscuit or their own boot. The old-timers pass down tips. Bang your biscuit to scare off the weevils. Protein is protein. And always sniff the meat before biting. You want it salty, not sour. Sometimes there are treats. A lump of cheese that is 1/3 actual cheese, 2/3 blue mold, or a dried pea pudding, which is less pudding and more mashed regret. The cook's only spice is hope and the occasional crushed peppercorn, strictly rationed and probably worth more than your wages. But what breakfast lacks in flavor, it makes up for in camaraderie. You watch, you listen, and you joke, because if you didn't, you'd weep into your biscuit. Jokes about the captain, rumors of rats in the flour, and stories of mythical breakfast feasts back in Amsterdam. Some days, someone finds a bug in their biscuit and raises it in toast to fresh meat. The laughter, brief and ragged, makes the meal bearable. You finish by scraping crumbs into a tin, rinsing your teeth with beer, and swearing you'll never take bread for granted again. On a VOC ship, breakfast isn't a luxury. It's a daily survival challenge. And every meal, no matter how dire, means you've made it one day closer to land, hope, and maybe, someday, a real loaf of bread. Life aboard a VOC ship is a lesson in hierarchy, strict, layered, and about as flexible as a ship's biscuit left in the Sunday. It's less of a democracy and more of a floating social pyramid, carefully maintained by tradition, fear, and the threat of public punishment. You are never allowed to forget where you stand, which, for most people, is somewhere near the bottom, wedged between the barrel of salted fish and a deckhand named Big Hans, whose greatest ambition is to nap undisturbed. At the top of this human stack sits the captain, a man of iron will and, ideally, actual sailing ability. The captain is equal parts father figure, tyrant, and, on good days, referee in a never-ending slapstick comedy. His word is law. If he says, you swab the deck, you swab the deck. If he says you're steering into a typhoon for the glory of the VOC, you put on your bravest face and prepare to be wet and terrified for the next 6 hours. The captain gets the best quarters. By best, we mean a slightly larger, slightly less moldy closet with a door he can slam for dramatic effect. He eats first, drinks the least disgusting beer, and gets a chair with all 4 legs still attached. Directly beneath him are the officers. These men are the middle managers of the sea, ambitious, stern, and always on the lookout for mistakes they can blame on someone else. There's the first mate, who handles discipline and is known for having the sharpest tongue, and sometimes, unfortunately, the sharpest boots. Then there's the quartermaster, who is basically in charge of everything except actually steering the ship. He manages supplies, distributes rations, and yells at you if you so much as look at the biscuit barrel wrong. If you want to avoid trouble, avoid the quartermaster. He can spot biscuit theft at 50 paces. Then you have the specialist crew. These are your carpenters, sailmakers, and the ship's barber surgeon, a man whose official responsibilities include cutting hair, performing surgery, and providing dental work with the same rusty blade. These specialists command a weird mix of respect and fear. If the carpenter doesn't like you, the next time your hammock collapses, he'll pretend it's a mystery. The barber? Well, you'll think twice before complaining about a bad haircut when you know he's also the guy holding the leeches. The bulk of the population is the ordinary crew. This is you, most likely. Deckhands, sailors, and general laborers. You do all the actual work. Hauling ropes, climbing masts, scrubbing, bailing, singing shanties, and hoping no one notices you're missing a shoe. The only thing lower than you is the ship's boy, whose job is to fetch, carry, and be blamed for everything that goes wrong. There's a pecking order here, and it's enforced by tradition, brute strength, and the occasional creative insult. And finally, every ship has its cast of misfits. The man who insists he can predict the weather by staring at the cat, the cook who swears he once sailed with pirates, and, always, at least one guy who talks to rats. Nobody remembers hiring him. He's been there since the ship was built, probably, and he knows the name of every rat on board. Some say he's lucky. Others say he's cursed. But on a ship where half the food is missing and the other half is gnawed, it pays to be on good terms with the rodent whisperer. In practice, the ship's hierarchy is less about power and more about survival. You need the captain to steer. You need the cook to keep you alive. You need the guy who talks to rats to make sure your biscuit stays yours. It's a delicate balance. A floating society, held together by duty, shared misery, and the faint hope that someday you'll be the one giving orders. Until then, you keep your head down, follow orders, and try not to annoy anyone with more stripes or fewer scruples than you. Welcome to the VOC's grand experiment in nautical management, where everyone has a role, everyone has a grievance, and the rats? The rats are just waiting to take over. When it comes to hygiene aboard a VOC ship, the only standard is, don't get any dirtier than the guy next to you. Which, to be fair, is a challenge. By modern standards, you and your crewmates are less freshly showered and more petri dish in breeches. Your morning routine is a masterclass in creative neglect, assisted by the gentle encouragement of chronic shortages and a crew-wide agreement to never talk about smells. Start with the basics. There is no shower. The closest you'll get is standing in a downpour on the main deck, arms outstretched, pretending you're in a Dutch version of Singing in the Rain, while the first mate yells at you for tracking mud back onto the planks. If you want to wash, you have two choices: a bucket of icy seawater or the leftover dregs in the washing barrel. The seawater is always available. Just heave a bucket over the side and hope you don't also catch a jellyfish. The barrel, on the other hand, is a legendary soup of soap flakes, half-dissolved salt, and a surprising number of floating hairs. By the time it's your turn, it smells like defeat and athlete's foot. For most, bathing means dabbing at your armpits with a rag, then wiping it on the nearest rope. It's the kind of cleaning that leaves you feeling refreshed for about 3 minutes, until the next man repeats the process with the same rag, but less conviction. Your face, hands, and occasionally your feet get the most attention, mainly because those are the bits that get noticed by officers and potential love interests. Red, nobody. Everything else is a spring cleaning project, reserved for the rarest of rainstorms or the even rarer day off. Soap is technically issued, but good luck finding any. It's been traded, lost, or melted into the cracks in the deck. Some sailors hoard their soap, carving off tiny pieces and using it as makeshift currency. You want an extra spoonful of grog? That'll cost you half a bar. Need the carpenter to patch your leaking hammock? Offer up a precious soap sliver, and he'll throw in a smile maybe. The value of soap increases directly in proportion to the crew's collective stink. Teeth brushing is a game of optimism. The standard equipment is a chew stick, just a splintered twig, frayed at the end and gnawed until it's slightly less pointy. If you're lucky, someone brought actual tooth powder from home. If not, it's a matter of spit, elbow grease, and prayer. The real dental work is handled by the ship's barber, who is quick to recommend a tooth pulling for anything from a mild ache to a complaint about your breath. It's preventive medicine, 17th century style. Clothing gets even rougher treatment. You have one, maybe two shirts, and a pair of trousers, and you wear them until they reach the self-aware stage. Laundry day is an event, usually spurred on by an infestation of lice or a friendly outbreak of rash. You wash your clothes in salt water, which removes some of the sweat but replaces it with the kind of crispiness usually reserved for potato chips. You hang everything on the rigging, hoping the sun and wind will do what soap cannot: scare away the smell. Of course, there are always those who simply give up. Their hair forms its own ecosystem. Their socks achieve structural rigidity, and you can track their progress by the visible trail of alarmed flies. Yet nobody judges too harshly. In the world of VOC hygiene, what goes around comes around, especially if it's a stubborn case of athlete's foot, so each morning you splash, scrape, and shrug your way to readiness. Because at sea, Personal hygiene isn't about impressing anyone. It's about not being the first person thrown overboard when the wind shifts and the stench rolls in. And in this particular contest, everyone's already losing. On a VOC ship, teeth are less a point of pride and more a countdown timer. If you boarded with a full set, you'll be lucky to finish your contract without losing a few, and you'll definitely lose your illusions about oral hygiene. In the 17th century, dentistry is a word nobody uses, mostly because it hasn't been invented yet. Instead, the job falls to the ship's barber, whose resume includes haircuts, amputations, and pulling teeth by brute force. He's not so much a healthcare professional as a man with a sharp knife and a sturdy grip. The first thing you notice is how quickly your teeth rebel against life at sea. The ship's biscuit, that culinary marvel, is a master of dental destruction. Each bite sends shockwaves through your molars and sometimes through your soul. If there are still crunchy weevils inside, consider it bonus calcium. The biscuit has two settings, brick or sponge, depending on how much seawater has seeped into the storage barrel. Either way, your teeth are not happy. Salt meat isn't much better. It's so tough and stringy that after 5 minutes of chewing, you feel like you're training for the world's worst jawline competition. The beef fights back. Pork, meanwhile, gets stuck in your molars until you're convinced you've grown an extra tooth out of pure spite. The only food that seems truly safe is porridge. But that's mostly because the cook forgot to include anything that would require chewing. The result? Your teeth spend months swinging between neglect and outright assault. As for cleaning them, it's best described as wishful thinking. Most sailors bring a toothstick, a bit of wood, chewed at one end and poked hopefully at the gaps between teeth. A lucky few might have a rag and a pinch of salt. Tooth powder is rare, and if you run out, you just scrape off plaque with your fingernail and hope nobody's watching. Mouthwash? Sure, if you count a rinse with weak beer. The general consensus is that the less you think about your teeth, the longer you'll keep them. But then comes the toothache, the sailor's true enemy. It starts as a dull, nagging ache. You try to ignore it, but the pain grows, a throbbing reminder that you're hundreds of miles from the nearest actual doctor. Your bunkmates offer remedies. Chew on cloves, rinse with salt water, or press a cold spoon to your cheek. If you're desperate, you might even try to barter for a mouthful of the cook's strongest liquor, which doubles as both pain relief and a lesson in regret. Nothing works for long. When things get truly dire, it's time for the barber. He'll listen patiently, nod sagely, and then reach for his favorite tool, a pair of pliers that's also seen use on stubborn nails and the occasional rat. Anesthetics don't exist, unless you count a shot of rum and 2 friends willing to hold you down. The extraction is quick but not gentle, a sharp yank, a spurt of blood, and a communal sigh of relief from everyone except you. Afterward, the barber might hand you a filthy rag and a bit of encouragement, but he'll save the tooth as a souvenir, or maybe a warning to the next customer. If you're lucky, the pain fades, and the gap in your smile is just another souvenir of your voyage. If not, the wound can fester. Infection is a real threat. An abscessed tooth can lay a man low faster than a rogue wave. There are no antibiotics, just hope and a willingness to try every folk remedy the crew knows. The true miracle isn't that so many sailors lose teeth, it's that anyone keeps them at all. So you smile when you can, you chew when you must, and every now and then you dream of a future with soft bread, clean water, and a world where toothache isn't your most persistent companion. Until then, you get by, one painful bite at a time. You'd think, given the VOC's ambition to control half the world's trade, that someone would have figured out how to get from Amsterdam to Batavia without taking a wrong turn at Madagascar. But no, the art of navigation in the 17th century is equal parts science, guesswork, and desperate prayer. Your fate is determined by a handful of maps, some brass instruments, and whether the navigator had enough beer to steady his hand, but not so much that he starts charting a course to Brazil by mistake. Let's talk about the tools. The captain and his trusted officers will occasionally gather on the quarterdeck and peer at a map the size of a small bedsheet. These maps are hand-drawn, lovingly inaccurate, and filled with more sea monsters than actual islands. The routes are marked in bold, inky lines, with helpful notes like "Here be dragons," probably not Spain, and if you see coconut trees, turn around. The maps smell of mildew, old ink, and existential dread. The next weapon in the navigation arsenal is the compass, a fine device, if it's working. Sometimes the needle sticks, sometimes it points at the cook's earring, and sometimes the whole thing goes missing for days, only to be found being used as a makeshift marble set by the ship's boy. If you want to know which way is north, you look at the compass, squint suspiciously, and then check if the sun is rising where it's supposed to. Stars are the true guide of every sailor, assuming the clouds ever part. At night, the first mate pretends to recognize various constellations, all while the rest of the crew nods in solemn agreement and quietly admit they can only find the Big Dipper because it looks like a ladle. On cloudy nights, the only thing you can see is your own breath and the terrified glances of your fellow travelers. Navigation, at its core, is a daily lesson in optimism and selective memory. The most reliable timekeeper on board is the sand glass, flipped on the hour by a boy who can't count past 12. When the hourglass is empty, he flips it again, sometimes with a flourish, as if time itself might be impressed. The officers use a log line, a knotted rope thrown overboard, to measure speed, counting knots as they slip by. It's a process that is equal parts arithmetic, and let's just round up. All this data is entered into the ship's logbook, which is either a detailed record or, more likely, a running commentary on which crew member fell overboard this week. Of course, nothing ever goes as planned. The winds change without warning. The currents drag you off course, sometimes for days, while everyone pretends it was on purpose. The captain blames the stars. The navigator blames the map. The crew blames the navigator, the map, the captain, the weather, and the fact that the biscuits are now growing something green. It's democracy by muttered complaint. The daily routine of steering the ship is made all the more challenging by heat and exhaustion. Sunburn is your constant companion, nose peeling, neck sizzling, and calves glowing with the sort of red that makes lobsters nervous. You cover up with whatever you have. Hats, rags, or, in moments of true ingenuity, someone else's shirt. The water reflects the sunlight, doubling your exposure and leaving you with tan lines that will baffle your grandchildren. Occasionally, after weeks of drifting and arguing, a cry goes up, "Land ho!" Everyone rushes to the rail, only to realize it's a cloud, a whale, or the ship's cook waving a particularly large cabbage. Hope springs eternal, but mostly you're lost, drunk on weak beer, and praying you're not about to discover Australia 3 centuries early. Still, you sail on. Every sunrise is a new chance to get lost in style. The ocean is wide, the map is wrong, and nobody really knows where they're going. But at least you're all lost together. One thing they never mentioned in the VOC recruitment pitch: sailing halfway across the world means you'll meet every possible weather pattern, and most of them will try to kill you. The only consistent forecast? Unpleasant, with a strong chance of regret. You signed up for adventure and trade. What you got was an all-inclusive masterclass in surviving wind, water, and your own bad decisions. If you thought the rain in Amsterdam was rough, just wait until the sky forgets to hold back. It always starts the same way, a faint, nervous energy buzzing through the ship. Old sailors squint at the horizon and start muttering about air pressure, seagulls, and the color of the sunset. The more they whisper, the less you sleep. Then the wind picks up, and suddenly the calm blue world turns black and bruised. The first mate starts yelling orders no one understands. The captain stands stoically in his best coat, just for morale, and the ship begins to groan in ways that suggest the wood has reconsidered its life choices. The first drops of rain are almost refreshing. You think, maybe it's just a squall. This is the same optimism that leads you to bite into a ship's biscuit before checking it for worms. The rain quickly escalates to a horizontal assault, pelting you with drops so hard you begin to wonder if you owe the weather money. Visibility drops. Your wool clothes, which already felt like a damp hug, transform into waterlogged torture devices. The deck becomes a skating rink for the brave and the soon-to-be injured. Now comes the fun part, waves. You never really understand how tall a wave can be until one is staring you in the face, blocking out the sky and your will to live. The ship pitches and rolls, throwing everything and everyone not tied down across the deck. Barrels break loose and play a rousing game of crush the deckhand. You clutch the nearest rope and pray it's not the one holding up the mainsail. One wrong move, and you're either tangled like a particularly sad marionette or swept off your feet, earning a first-hand tour of the gunwale. Lightning splits the sky, thunder rattles your bones, and somewhere the cook tries to secure the soup pot before it becomes a weapon of mass destruction. There's a saying on board: when the sea's angry, the soup bites back. You've never seen so many grown men cling to each other, wailing apologies for things they haven't done yet. Then there's the bailing. When the ship starts taking on water, the call goes out for every able hand. No rank, no excuses. Buckets are passed, lines form, and you scoop, toss, and repeat, hoping you're throwing water out faster than it's coming in. At some point, you realize you're just as wet inside the ship as out. You start to envy fish for their adaptability. Storms test more than the hull, they test morale. The youngest sailors cry for their mothers, the oldest ones curse every shipwright from here to Rotterdam. Jokes get darker, prayers get louder, and the man who talks to rats claims the rodents know a way out. There's a camaraderie in shared terror. Nothing bonds a crew like mutual pants, wetting fear. When finally the storm passes and the sun peeks out, the deck is a battlefield of broken barrels, tangled ropes, and sailors trying to look braver than they feel. Someone always claims to have seen a ghost, or a mermaid, or the devil himself. No one believes them, but no one argues either. You wring out your socks, check that all your toes are still attached, and silently vow never to complain about a drizzle again. Surviving a storm at sea is the VOC's unofficial initiation. If you can endure it, you've earned your stripes and possibly a lifelong phobia of clouds. The weather doesn't care if you're brave. It only cares if you're still floating. And if you are, well, congratulations. Your life insurance is probably laughing, but at least you've got another story to tell if you ever see dry land again. No one boards a VOC ship for the cuisine. But even the most optimistic sailor starts to miss home-cooked meals when the rations begin to dwindle. You may have survived on ship's biscuit and salt beef so far, but once the food barrels run low, a new culinary adventure awaits. The unplanned switch to a diet of desperation and bonus protein that crawls, wriggles, and occasionally waves back. It starts innocently enough. The cook announces that supplies are tight, which is code for the good stuff is gone, and the rest is plotting a revolt. Breakfast now means a smaller biscuit. Lunch is half a ration of salted fish, if it can still be identified as fish. And dinner? Let's just say the soup gets thinner each day, and no one asks what's floating in it. You quickly discover that Weevil isn't a joke. Ship's biscuits, left to marinate in the warm, damp hold, become 5-star resorts for bugs. You break open your morning biscuit, and voila! A small flurry of weevils emerges, blinking in the lantern light. Some sailors flick them away with casual indifference. Others squint, shrug, and eat the biscuit anyway. Protein is protein. You tell yourself it's extra crunch, and after a while, you stop caring. It's either this or starvation. Salt meat transforms too. What was once just impossibly tough now comes in new and alarming shades of green and blue. If you're lucky, you find a patch that's still edible. If not, you cut away the mystery bits and hope for the best. There's a certain camaraderie in sharing stories of the worst bite you survived. Like the time the quartermaster found a bonus tail in the beef, or when the ship's boy chewed on something that bit back. Of course, every meal is flavored by the knowledge that there's no resupply until landfall. You count barrels and days, trading rumors about what's left. The galley becomes a theater of creative despair. Dried peas get mashed into mush, vinegar is passed off as a sauce, and the one remaining onion is guarded like a royal heir. A lucky day means a spoonful of pickled cabbage. A bad day is a soup of hot water and hope. You dream of apples and fresh bread, but you wake up to another bowl of nothing. Some crew members get inventive. Fish hooks are snuck on deck, lines dangled overboard in the hope of catching something, anything, that might be edible. If someone lands a fish, it's cause for celebration, or at least a break from the monotony. Once, a gull is caught and stewed, and the story is retold for months. Tasted like victory and boots. Desperate men start eyeing the rats with new interest, though catching one is trickier than it looks, and the man who talks to them doesn't appreciate the attention. It's not just about hunger, it's about morale. Food becomes currency, bargaining chip, and status symbol. The carpenter might trade a patch job for a sliver of cheese. The first mate might look the other way if you bribe him with the last of your dried fruit. Rivalries flare, alliances shift, and everyone counts crumbs. The officers, of course, get the best of what's left. You get whatever didn't crawl away fast enough. But hunger does something remarkable. It binds you to the others. The crew, united in shared discomfort, finds humor in disaster. You make up songs about maggot stew, hold contests to see who can swallow a bug without flinching, and toast each other with mugs of vitamin G. That's G for gruel. The laughter helps, even if the meals don't. By the time the lookout shouts "land ho!" you barely remember what real food tastes like. But you do remember the jokes, the stories, and the day you stopped flicking weevils out of your biscuit and started inviting them in. Survival isn't just about what you eat, it's about what you can laugh about later. On a VOC ship, hunger builds character and occasionally extra protein. You survived the weevils at breakfast and the salt beef at lunch. But now comes the part of the day every VOC sailor dreads. Bedtime. Or, as it's more accurately known, the nightly struggle for personal space, limited airflow, and a couple hours of unconsciousness in conditions that redefine the phrase "roughing it." Welcome to the sleeping quarters, where comfort goes to die and dreams are mostly about beds that don't creak or crawl. Picture the ship's lower deck, low ceilings, narrow aisles, and so many hammocks strung up that the whole scene looks like a spider convention after a hard night out. Each hammock is about 2 hand widths apart. Just enough space to guarantee you'll accidentally elbow your neighbor whenever you roll over. The air is thick, heavy with the scents of sweat, mildew, tar, and feet. Your only real ventilation comes from the occasional hatch cracked open above, which does little more than let in more sea air and, sometimes, a helpful spray of rain. Finding your hammock is an adventure. The ship rocks constantly, so you need the balance of a tightrope walker to get in without flipping yourself onto the man below you. If you're new, you quickly learn that every move is a potential disaster. If you're lucky, you get a spot in the middle, away from leaky hatches and the hull, where water and cold seep in at night. The unlucky ones get what's called hot bunking, rotating through the same hammock as the shift changes, meaning you get to sleep in a bed that's still warm and damp from its previous occupant. It's the 17th century version of a hotel hot tub, and just as appealing. There's no such thing as privacy. Sailors snore, mumble, and occasionally sleepwalk. Someone is always scratching, adjusting, or singing themselves to sleep with shanties that sound suspiciously like crying. You hear every cough, every groan, and every rat scampering along the beams above. Forget about changing into sleepwear. Whatever you wore today is what you'll wear tonight. Undressing is for people with spare clothes and optimism. Bedding is a luxury. The standard issue hammock is a rectangle of coarse canvas tied up with fraying rope. If you're an officer, you might have a slightly larger hammock and a blanket that doesn't bite back. The rest of the crew improvises. Jackets for pillows, boots for weights, and, if you're truly desperate, an empty barrel as a last resort. Pillows? If you find something soft, you keep it a secret. The nightly ambience is a symphony, snoring that could rattle windows, creaking timbers, the ever-present slap of waves, and if you're lucky, a lull in the chorus of flatulence. Nobody judges. Everyone is guilty. Rats patrol the shadows, occasionally dropping by to sample a biscuit crumb or remind you of the ship's unofficial pecking order. Then there's the temperature. On warm nights, the lower deck becomes a human oven, sweat pooling, tempers flaring, and dreams evaporating in a haze of body heat. On cold nights, the wind howls through every crack, and you shiver in your hammock, teeth chattering in rhythm with the hull. Either way, you sleep light, waking at every sound, every shift in the ship, every suspicious silence. Of course, nightmares are common. Some dream of falling overboard, others of being called on deck during a storm. But the most realistic nightmare is the morning itself, waking up sore, itchy, hungry, and already missing the 2 hours you managed to sleep. There's a reason sailors tell stories about ghosts. Everyone is haunted by the lower deck. Still, after a while, you get used to it. The chaos becomes routine, the discomfort just another part of the voyage. You find solace in small mercies. A breeze on a hot night, a quiet moment before the snoring begins, the rare chance to wake up and discover you're alone in your hammock, at least until the next shift. Because on a VOC ship, sleep is not a right, it's a negotiation. And tonight, you're haggling for every minute. You might assume that life on a VOC ship is an endless grind of labor, seasickness, and avoiding scurvy. And you'd be right, but only up to dinner. After that, the ship comes alive with its own version of entertainment, a term used so loosely it could slip between the deck planks and escape to Java. When the sun sets and the officers retreat to their slightly less miserable quarters, the lower decks become the world's most desperate tavern, minus the cheap ale and with twice as many unresolved personal issues. First on the bill is gambling, the true universal language of bored sailors. Out come the dice, coins, and even slivers of soap. Anything with value is fair game. The stakes? Everything from extra rations to the right to sleep farther away from the smelliest crewmate. The games are fast, loud, and often devolve into passionate debates over whether a rat ran off with someone's lucky die. There's always one veteran who claims to have a system, and always one ship's boy who somehow wins everything and immediately loses it again. Cheating is both discouraged and expected. If you get caught, you owe the winner an apology and the loser a chore, or, if tempers run high, a black eye. Not into dice? No problem. Fistfights are the next most popular pastime. Life on board is stressful, cramped, and marinated in sweat. Add a little bad luck at the gaming table, and suddenly 2 grown men are wrestling on the deck over who finished the last of the dried peas. The ring is any open space, and the audience is everyone not currently sleeping, eating, or hiding from the quartermaster. Most fights are quick, more shouting and flailing than actual harm. The barber keeps a bucket of cold seawater ready, just in case. The unwritten rule: you shake hands when it's over, or at least stop bleeding on the bedding. Fights provide relief, release, and an excellent excuse to avoid chores. Music is a rare but welcome distraction. Someone always brings a battered fiddle, pipe or drum. And for a few moments, the ship feels less like a prison and more like a drunken, floating carnival. Sea shanties echo through the decks, rowdy, rhythmic, and usually focused on the misfortunes of officers, the virtues of grog, and the unlikely prospect of ever seeing Amsterdam again. Even those who can't sing join in, their voices blending into a raucous chorus that drowns out the creaking hull and the endless slap of waves. Storytelling is another mainstay. Veterans swap tall tales of sea monsters, legendary storms, and the infamous voyage when the cook accidentally fed the captain's hat to the crew. Every story gets a little bigger each time it's told. There are ghost stories too, recounted in hushed voices while the lanterns flicker. Did you hear the one about the spectral Dutchman who walks the deck at midnight, looking for his lost tooth? No one believes it, but everyone listens. And then, of course, there's snoring, the great democratic entertainment of the high seas. It starts with a gentle rumble, like distant thunder, and builds to a cacophony that drowns out both song and fight. Some men snore so loudly the ship's rats relocate for the night. Bets are placed on who will start first and who will end last. If you can sleep through it, you're ready for anything the VOC can throw at you. For those who can't find solace in games, brawls, or song, there's always watching the stars, listening to the water, or simply sitting in quiet conversation with a bunkmate, sharing hopes for the future or laughing about today's disasters. Entertainment on a VOC ship isn't glamorous. It's loud, chaotic, and occasionally bloody, but it's the glue that holds a weary, seasick, half-starved crew together. And on nights when the sea is calm and the laughter drowns out the misery, you almost forget you're thousands of miles from home. If only until the next round of snoring begins. Every VOC sailor learns fast. The real enemy isn't the ocean or the storms, it's the constant, creeping parade of coughs, spots, boils, and mystery aches marching through the lower deck. If you're not coughing, you're probably new. If you're not scratching, you're a liar. Illness isn't an exception on the ship, it's the baseline. This is healthcare in the age of discovery. Communal, creative, and always just one sneeze away from disaster. The soundtrack of the lower deck is the hack and wheeze of men slowly losing their battle against every disease the 17th century has to offer. Someone's coughing up a lung, someone else is blowing their nose on a sleeve, and the barber is lurking with a bucket of leeches, hoping for business. If someone seems healthy, it's only because their symptoms haven't kicked in yet. The biggest villain is scurvy, that infamous terror of the high seas. Scurvy starts subtle. Bleeding gums, aching limbs, mood swings. But soon enough, sailors' teeth loosen, wounds refuse to heal, and even the smallest task feels like trying to row the ship with a spoon. Fresh fruit could fix it, but the only oranges on board are in the cook's imagination, and the lemon ration ran out somewhere off the coast of Africa. The solution? Drink more vinegar and hope for the best. It doesn't help, but it keeps morale tangy. If it's not scurvy, it's dysentery, or the bloody flux, as it's fondly known. This cheerful ailment turns every bucket into a hazard zone and every sailor into a cautious optimist. The rule: always check before you sit. And never trust a smile from someone who just sprinted to the privy. Hand washing is mostly theoretical. You'll get sick, you'll recover, and then you'll get sick again. It's the circle of life, VOC style. Fevers are so common that no one even bothers to whisper about them. Hot one, eh? Someone will ask as you sweat through your shirt and hallucinate that the ship's cat is offering medical advice. The barber, who doubles as the surgeon, prescribes the classic Dutch remedy. Let's bleed you and see what happens. You lose a pint of blood and, occasionally, the will to live. On the bright side, you get to rest for an hour before being sent back to mop the deck. Injuries are inevitable when every surface is sharp, slippery, or both. Sailors sport a rainbow of bruises, sprains, and bandaged fingers. The lucky ones just stub a toe or jam a thumb. The unlucky ones lose a bit more. A finger in a rope, a patch of scalp to an errant pulley, or worse. There are no safety rails, just curses and bad luck. If the injury's bad, it's up to the barber again, who'll reach for his amputation saw with a little too much enthusiasm. Anesthetics? Sure, there's rum, a rag to bite down on, and some strong language. Recovery is a gamble. Infection is everywhere. It's not all doom and gloom. The crew develops a morbid sense of humor. Jokes about catching the Batavian rash or surviving another round with the butcher-barber fly thick and fast. The man with the fewest boils becomes a local legend. Envied and suspected in equal measure. Superstitions spread. Wear a lucky charm, avoid the cursed hammock, and don't let the rats sniff your shoes. They might steal your good health. Despite it all, life goes on. You learn to ignore the coughs, laugh off the aches, and treasure the rare days when you feel halfway human. Because on a VOC ship, illness is just another shipmate, annoying, unavoidable, and always along for the ride. You survive if you're tough, lucky, or simply too stubborn to let the next cough win. One of the first things you receive after signing your life away to the VOC is your official uniform. It's supposed to make you look like a proud representative of Dutch commerce. In reality, it's a punishment masquerading as professional attire. The VOC uniform is an exercise in discomfort, built for a climate that exists only in the imagination of a Dutch quartermaster who has never seen the tropics and assumes wool is universally appropriate. Let's break down the ensemble. At the heart is the sturdy wool doublet, a thick, buttoned jacket designed to trap warmth with all the subtlety of a brick oven. You'll also be issued woolen breeches, a linen undershirt, which you'll cherish for its rare breathability, long wool stockings, and a pair of shoes that seem engineered for rapid blister production. For extra flair, there's the wide-brimmed VOC hat, great for keeping off the sun, less effective at hiding the fact that you're slowly marinating in your own sweat. The color palette? A cheerful array of dirt-resistant brown, mud-concealing grey. And it used to be blue. After a week at sea, everything fades to the same uniform shade, shipboard taupe. No matter how careful you are, the salty sea air and endless sunshine work together to bleach, stain, and generally ruin your best and only outfit within days. Wool is wonderful in Amsterdam, where the wind howls and rain comes at you sideways. In the tropics, it's an unending, soggy torture. The uniform soaks up sweat, rain, and, if you're unlucky, seawater, then holds it against your skin like an overzealous ex. You bake under the sun, swelter in the hold, and at night, when the temperature drops, you get to enjoy the unique sensation of freezing inside damp wool. The itchiness alone is enough to make you contemplate going nude. If only that weren't a flogging offense. You might try to modify your kit. Some sailors cut their sleeves short, roll up their breeches, or lose their stockings overboard. Officers notice and yell. But after a week in Batavia, even the captain has sweat stains down to his boots. The quartermaster may have rules, but sweat always wins. Laundering your uniform is theoretically encouraged, practically impossible. The only water available is salty, the only soap is a rumor, and the only place to dry your clothes is on the rigging, where they're equally likely to be stolen by a desperate crewmate or blown overboard in a sudden squall. After a few weeks, you and your uniform have a relationship best described as adversarial cohabitation. The shoes deserve their own complaint. Made of stiff, barely treated leather, they require a break-in period longer than most contracts. The soles are thin enough to let you feel every splinter and pebble, yet thick enough to guarantee you'll never outrun a rat. When the shoes fall apart, and they will, you improvise with scraps, rags, or just toughen up your feet and hope for the best. There's also the matter of headgear. The iconic wide-brimmed hat is almost stylish, if you squint. It keeps some sun off your nose, doubles as a makeshift bowl in a pinch, and, on rough nights, can be curled into a half-decent pillow. The downside: it blows away at the faintest breeze, and chasing it across the deck is a popular spectator sport. Despite the hardship, the uniform has its moments. On cold mornings, you're grateful for the extra layers. When you finally reach port, it marks you out as VOC, a badge of pride, misery, and shared suffering. You and your uniform endure together, one sweat-soaked, salt-stained, threadbare day at a time. If you ever get home, you'll never look at wool the same way again, because on a VOC ship, the uniform is more than clothing. It's a challenge, a badge, and sometimes an excuse for why you smell like both a barn and a swamp at the same time. Wear it with pride. Or at least, wear it until it walks off on its own. After weeks, maybe months, rocking on the endless blue, smelling like a blend of despair, mildew, and salted protein, someone finally shouts the two words every VOC sailor dreams of: land ho. The ship erupts. Faces press to the railings, hearts pound, and even the rats take a break from gnawing the biscuit supply to enjoy the view. You've survived the storms, the weevils, the fights, and the snoring. Now you're about to discover what exotic actually means. From a distance, landfall looks like paradise. Swaying palms, sunlit beaches, and green so vivid it makes your old Dutch countryside memories seem washed out and soggy. The air is thick and warm, scented with unfamiliar flowers, wood smoke, and, if you squint, something distinctly spicy. But as the ship draws closer, the illusion peels away. The white sand beach is mostly mud. The gentle waves carry the occasional floating coconut or dead fish, and the palm trees are already home to more mosquitoes than people. Disembarkation is less of a triumphant arrival and more like being shaken out of a giant salt shaker. The gangplank wobbles. Your legs forget how to work on solid ground, and you lurch down onto the dock with all the grace of a newborn goat. Locals watch with polite amusement as you and your shipmates stagger around, clutching at barrels and marveling at the absence of creaking wood beneath your feet. Someone immediately manages to fall in the harbor. You pretend not to know him. The first breath of air off the ship is a revelation, and also a warning. Gone is the stale, recycled stench of 200 men in wool. Now you're hit with the sharp tang of mud, salt, tropical rot, and livestock. There are new noises too: birds shrieking, monkeys chattering, the distant calls of vendors, and your own stomach, reminding you that whatever food you find here can't be worse than shipboard rations. At least, that's the hope. The colors are dazzling, so many greens, reds, and yellows. You wonder if you've landed inside a painter's fever dream. You see locals in bright, airy clothes, calmly ignoring your ragged, sweat-stained uniform and the odor that announces your arrival 5 steps ahead. Some smile, others stare. Everyone seems more at ease with the heat than you are. Within 10 minutes, you're sweating through your clothes in a way that makes you nostalgic for Amsterdam's foggy drizzle. The orders are simple: unload the ship, secure the cargo, and don't embarrass the company. The officers march about barking instructions, but it's hard to focus when every plant looks like it might be poisonous and every insect twice as determined. If you have to work near the jungle's edge, you'll meet new friends: mosquitoes with ambitions, ants with tempers, and a lizard so large you briefly consider negotiating for your life. Food is the next surprise. Spices waft through the market: pepper, clove, nutmeg, and things you can't identify but will later try and regret. You watch, fascinated and slightly horrified, as locals prepare meals using methods that seem part magic, part dare. You recognize rice. But after that, it's a blur of ingredients that don't come with a Dutch translation. Bravely, you try a sample. It's delicious, and then your mouth bursts into flame, your eyes water, and you spend 10 minutes pretending you always wanted to sweat out of your eyelids. Not everything is new in a good way. You're introduced to the local latrine situation and suddenly the ship's bucket doesn't seem so bad. Animals roam freely, goats on the dock, chickens underfoot, the occasional cow looking at you like it's judging your life choices. Still, for all its chaos and confusion, landfall is a relief. You survived the ocean's worst. You're walking on something that doesn't move, and there's at least a chance your next meal won't bite back. Exotic might not always be comfortable, but after so long at sea, discomfort has become your native language. Welcome to land. Now try not to get sunburned in the first hour. The official reason you've sailed halfway around the globe, survived storms, weevils, and mysterious rashes, isn't for glory or even for the adventure. It's for spices, those little nuggets of flavor that can turn a bland Dutch stew into something that almost tastes like food. The VOC doesn't build empires for fun. It does it for pepper, nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon, and whatever else Europeans are convinced will keep the plague away and dinner guests impressed. Welcome to the world of early capitalism. Global trade, local misery. Trading spices isn't as glamorous as the company pamphlets promised. There's no velvet pouch of gold, no grateful sultan shaking your hand, and absolutely no reward for honesty. The actual work is mostly haggling, paperwork, and pretending not to notice when your boots fill with mud and your conscience with guilt. It's part business, part bureaucracy, and part how many languages can you mangle before someone takes offense. First up, negotiation. The VOC likes to act like it's a guest, but the truth is, it behaves like a neighbor who borrows your lawnmower and then charges you to use it. The locals, who have been trading spices for centuries, know every trick. They can spot a greedy Dutchman at 100 paces. The market is a riot of shouting, hand signals, and elaborate politeness covering up a knife's edge of competition. If you want pepper, you'll pay the right price, or you'll pay later in other ways. There's a careful ritual to each transaction. Present your samples, act unimpressed, then argue for an hour about whose weights are cheating more. Sometimes money changes hands. More often, it's goods for goods, iron tools, cloth, beads, or, when things get tense, a little gunpowder. The VOC insists on contracts, receipts, and proper signatures. The locals insist on getting paid. Somewhere in the middle, an entire forest of paperwork sprouts, each page stamped, signed, and destined to be ignored by the first supervisor who loses a shipment. Corruption is everywhere. Middlemen skim off the top, officers forget to declare a few barrels, and if you're caught with extra nutmeg in your sock, you'll be fined, flogged, or promoted, depending on who notices. Smuggling is so common it's practically a job description. The line between trader and pirate blurs faster than you can say corporate ethics. Sometimes, negotiations get less friendly. The VOC didn't become the world's most profitable corporation by playing fair. If a village resists, there are threats. If a ruler balks, the cannons are quietly polished. The company's reputation for ruthlessness is well earned. Colonial power backed by muskets, contracts, and the assurance that the Home Office in Amsterdam will never know how bad it really gets. But the rewards are real. A single cargo hold of cloves can pay for the entire voyage and buy a new canal house back in Holland. You marvel at how something so small, pungent, and weirdly shaped can command such a price. The locals, meanwhile, look at your wool coat, your sunburn, and your inability to bargain, and wonder who the real sucker is. For the crew, the spice trade means work, endless loading and unloading, sweating under the tropical sun, and guarding the cargo like it's gold, which for the VOC it absolutely is. Every crate is tallied, every sack watched, and every minor theft punished. You learn to carry a sack of nutmeg like you're holding a newborn, because if you drop it, someone will invent a new way to dock your pay. By the end of the day, your hands are stained, your throat burns from bargaining, and your respect for the simple spice trade is gone forever. Trade is money. Money is power. And power, as every VOC man learns, comes with more strings and more peppercorns than you ever imagined. Spices built an empire. You're just here to load the boat. After the cargo is tallied and the haggling has tapered off, you find yourself confronted with a new daily challenge. Actually living alongside the people whose homeland you've just invaded in the name of the VOC. Welcome to the fine art of cultural exchange. 17th century style, where misunderstandings are common, language barriers are sturdy, and etiquette mistakes can go from hilarious to hazardous in the space of a single meal. It starts with greetings. You want to make a good impression, so you smile, nod, and, if you're feeling brave, attempt a local word or two. The result is usually a massacre of vowels and a polite, confused smile from your host. The Dutch handshake, firm and businesslike, is not always reciprocated. Sometimes it's met with a bow, a fist to chest, or a gesture that your ship's boy assures you is either a blessing or an insult involving goats. Either way, you hope for the best. Dining is a diplomatic minefield. The first time you're invited to eat with locals, you commit every possible blunder. Sitting before you're asked, reaching with the wrong hand, and marveling loudly at unfamiliar flavors. You quickly learn that slurping is encouraged. Belching is sometimes a compliment. And if something bites you back, it's probably meant to be that spicy. You also discover that Dutch attempts at polite conversation. So, how's your rice yield this year? Don't always translate well. Someone asks if you'd like more food. You say yes, then realize you just agreed to taste something described only as surprise from the river. The language barrier is a constant companion. You try to learn a few phrases, but progress is slow. Your vocabulary consists of greetings, apologies, and a lot of pointing. The local children find this endlessly entertaining, and soon your nickname translates to red-nosed shouter. Some of your shipmates have a knack for languages, picking up words just in time to accidentally start a minor trade war by mispronouncing peppercorn. Of course, there are gestures and customs you never quite figure out. Why do people touch their heads when talking about the sea? Why is whistling after sunset taboo? Why does everyone stop and stare when you offer your left hand? It's like living inside a daily pop quiz where every answer is no, not like that. You keep a running list of offenses, ranging from mild, accidentally insulted a fisherman's hat, to severe, sat on the village chief's ceremonial cat mat, cat included. Sometimes, the awkwardness has real consequences. A careless remark, a poorly timed joke, or a misinterpreted gift can sour relationships for weeks. Rumors spread fast. The Dutch are stingy, the locals are sneaky. Both sides are convinced the other is plotting to poison the stew. Every so often, tempers flare, and a scuffle breaks out at the market or the tavern. The company frowns on violence, but mostly hopes no paperwork reaches Amsterdam. But there are good days, too. You trade stories and songs, laugh at each other's mistakes, and learn to appreciate the differences that once baffled you. Someone teaches you how to tie a proper sarong. You show a local kid how to tie a knot and pray the boat doesn't go missing. Slowly, genuine friendships form, built on curiosity, shared hardship, and a mutual willingness to forgive every awkward moment that came before. At night, you reflect on how much you don't know and how much you've already learned. You came here for spices, silver, and a shot at getting rich. You're staying, in part, for the people and stories you'll never forget. Cultural encounters aren't always easy, and they're never perfect. But sometimes, with a little luck and a lot of humility, they're the best part of the entire voyage. Awkward, clumsy, and occasionally deadly, but always unforgettable. If you thought the most dangerous part of sailing for the VOC was the threat of storms or pirates, you've clearly never crossed paths with the colonial bureaucracy. For every musket the company ships overseas, it sends 3 accountants and a barrel of official forms. In the VOC's world, paperwork is more feared than malaria, more numerous than mosquitoes, and more complicated than your ship's knots after a night of gambling. It starts the moment you set foot in port. You're already half delirious from the heat and the new array of insects. But before you can even unload a crate of pepper, the port bookkeeper greets you with a stack of ledgers and a suspiciously cheery welcome. Every item, every transaction, every grain of rice must be recorded, tallied, stamped, and reported. Some men dream of treasure chests. You dream of not misplacing the cargo manifest. The warehouse is your new home away from home. It's filled with barrels, bales, and enough scrolls and paper to start your own library. Each crate gets a tag. Each tag gets an entry. And each entry gets checked by 3 separate officials, each one of whom is convinced you're stealing nutmeg, shortchanging the company, or just in desperate need of another lecture on proper Dutch filing practices. You once tried to carry 2 crates at once to save time. Now, you spend twice as long explaining to a clerk why you dared to think efficiency was allowed. Your supervisor is the most powerful man in the colony, not because of his wit or wisdom, but because he controls the stamp. No cargo moves, no wages are paid, no ration is served until the stamp comes down with all the finality of a hangman's noose. The company loves a good signature. Initial here, sign there. Repeat until your hand cramps and your faith in humanity withers. Lose a form? Prepare to spend a week retracing your steps and apologizing to everyone who outranks you, which, by VOC standards, is everyone but the goats. Money, of course, complicates everything. Every transaction is converted, recalculated, and then lost in translation between Dutch, Malay, and whatever creative language the local middlemen speak when they don't want you to understand. The exchange rate changes depending on who's asking. You might get paid in guilders, Spanish dollars, or IOUs written on the back of a fish recipe. Good luck explaining any of this to your wife back home, who just wants to know when she'll finally see her share of the easy company riches. The rules? They're always changing. One day, you're told to inventory every peppercorn. The next, you're reassured that a rough estimate is fine. Right before an auditor arrives, demanding to know exactly how many cloves were shipped out last Tuesday. Some officials thrive on the chaos. Others break under the weight of their own paperwork avalanche. For the ordinary sailor, it's a game of survival. Stay organized, stay invisible, and always know where your receipts are, especially if the wind picks up and the office windows are open. There's a rumor that somewhere in Batavia, there's a warehouse filled with nothing but lost forms, unsigned contracts, and forgotten reports. Some say if you listen at night, you can hear the ghosts of overworked clerks weeping into their inkpots. And don't forget, all this happens while the officers and merchants are out there making deals, eating spicy food, and occasionally defending the colony from real threats. You, on the other hand, are busy ensuring the company's records are neat, the paperwork is double-checked, and the right person gets blamed for any missing nutmeg. By the end of the day, your head is spinning from numbers, your hands stained with ink, and your soul a little lighter, mostly from all the signatures you've left behind. Colonial bureaucracy, where the real battles are fought with quills, not cutlasses, and where the true survivors aren't the strongest or smartest, but the best at keeping their paperwork dry. You've survived months of ship's biscuit, salt beef, and soup that occasionally blinked back. But now, on land in the East Indies, your stomach is in for a wild ride. Forget grey porridge and wilted cabbage. Here, the local diet is a symphony of colours, flavours, and sensations your taste buds have only heard rumours about. Welcome to your introduction to rice, fish, and spices that come with a warning label. The first thing you notice, rice is everywhere. Boiled, steamed, fried, sometimes all 3 in one meal. It's not a side dish, it's the foundation of existence. Your first few days, you marvel at how the locals can eat so much rice and still look healthy, while you, after 2 bowls, feel ready for a nap and possibly a new liver. Rice is served with everything: curries, stir-fried greens, dried fish, or, when supplies run low, just a pinch of salt. and the hope that tomorrow's market brings more options. And then comes the fish. Fresh from the river or sea, grilled over smoky coals, stewed with greens, or dried until it could double as roofing material, fish is on every plate, sometimes with eyes still intact, just to make sure you're paying attention. For the Dutch palate, used to herring and the occasional eel, the variety is staggering. Tiny fried anchovies pop like salty fireworks, whole grilled fish arrive on banana leaves, and every bite is a reminder that you're a long way from home. Sometimes, you chew a bone you weren't expecting. Sometimes the fish stares back with a look that says, "I warned you," but it's the spices that really set the meal and your mouth on fire. Locals toss in chilies, ginger, lemongrass, turmeric, galangal, and a parade of ingredients you'll only ever remember as the green thing that made me sweat. The Dutch, masters of pepper trading but still surprised by its actual effects, approach local food with a mix of curiosity, bravery, and profound regret. Your first real taste of sambal, a chili paste with the heat of 1,000 Dutch ovens, will be a moment you never forget. You try to play it cool, nodding sagely, while internally you're negotiating with any deity who will end the burning. Vegetables make an appearance, often chopped and tossed into a stir-fry so lively it practically dances on your plate. Eggplant, long beans, and leafy greens you can't name show up, mixed with peanuts, coconut milk, or a splash of tamarind. Fruits abound too: bananas, mangoes, pineapples, and papayas, each one juicier and stranger than anything back home. You bite into a mango expecting an apple and wind up with sticky hands, a delighted grin, and the knowledge that you'll be sticky for the rest of the day. Of course, there are some culinary curveballs. Fermented fish paste lurks in sauces, and the distinctive aroma lets you know you're not in Holland anymore. Street vendors offer fried snacks of mysterious origin, each one an invitation to gamble with your digestive system. Some things are delicious, others are educational, and a few should come with a warning and a priest. Still, after a week, you find yourself craving the heat, the tang, the complexity. You trade your fellow Dutchman for a place at the locals' fire, eager for another lesson in flavor. Your body adjusts eventually, and you start to understand the balance of sweet, sour, spicy, and savory that makes each meal memorable. The local diet isn't just sustenance, it's an initiation, a test, and a reward for surviving the journey. And as you spoon rice onto your plate, squeeze a lime over grilled fish, and brace for the next chili-induced vision quest, you realize you'll never look at boiled potatoes the same way again. Here, food doesn't just feed you, it fights back. And if you're lucky, you learn to love the battle. So, you've survived storms at sea, VOC rations, and your fellow crewmates snoring. Congratulations! Now it's time for your next life-threatening challenge, stepping off the beaten path and into the jungle. You may have come to the East Indies for spices, but you're about to learn the real cost, paid in sweat, stings, and the nagging suspicion that everything around you is plotting your demise. The first thing you notice is the heat. It's not just hot, it's the kind of muggy, suffocating air that wraps around you like a wool blanket soaked in soup. One step into the foliage, and your uniform is already clinging to you in places you'd rather not discuss. The air buzzes with life. Birds squawk, monkeys chatter, and somewhere, always, something is rustling ominously in the undergrowth. Mosquitoes are your constant companions. Forget the little annoyances back home. These are tiny, angry vampires with a work ethic. You slap one off your arm and 3 more land, each loaded with exotic diseases. Malaria, dengue, and a few so rare the local doctor just shrugs and writes good luck on your medical report. VOC sailors develop a twitch from swatting at thin air. The company issues mosquito nets, but unless you're an officer, your net probably has more holes than your last paycheck. Every step is a negotiation with nature. The jungle floor is a patchwork of slippery mud, hidden roots, and puddles that range from refreshing to possibly bottomless. You tread carefully, eyes peeled for snakes, some camouflaged, some bold and colorful, all convinced that your ankles are a personal affront. There's always a story of someone bitten on the way to the latrine, their foot swollen to the size of a coconut and their curses heard for miles. Then there are the insects. Ants as big as your thumb, beetles that hiss, and centipedes that move like they have a vendetta. Some bite, some sting, and a few just stare at you as if daring you to complain. Even the butterflies look suspicious, fluttering past in improbable colors. Wasps build nests under the eaves, and every now and then, someone learns the hard way not to poke them with a stick. The result is a lot of running, shouting, and a new appreciation for European houseflies. But it's not just the small things. Somewhere in the undergrowth, tigers prowl. You rarely see them, but every local can point out the tracks and recount tales of vanished livestock and the occasional unlucky trader. You listen at night and wonder if that was a monkey screaming or something with a lot more teeth. The company issues guns, but nobody feels confident when the eyes watching from the darkness are higher off the ground than your head. Even plants are out to get you. Vines trip you, thorns rip your stockings, and some leaves deliver a rash you'll remember for weeks. Fruit dangles temptingly overhead, but pick the wrong one, and you'll spend the next day learning why the locals call it sleepyberry. If it's not the fruit, it's the sap, or the bark, or the mushrooms that sprout in weird, ominous shapes. The rule is simple. If you don't recognize it, don't touch it, and if it moves, run. Through it all, there are hazards you never expected. Quicksand in low spots, leeches in puddles, monitor lizards sunning themselves on your path and staring you down like you owe them money. Every trip to the jungle is a group effort, with one eye on the ground and the other on your friend, just in case someone needs rescuing. You return to camp battered, bitten, and utterly humbled by nature. But you also return with stories, the snake you didn't see, the fruit you dared to taste, the mosquito bite shaped like Java itself. In the East Indies, the jungle isn't just background, it's the main event. And if you survive, you'll never look at a houseplant the same way again. You'd think, after a day of choking on spices, fighting off jungle wildlife, and pretending you know how to fill out colonial paperwork, you'd be entitled to a good night's sleep. Not in Batavia. Here, as dusk falls, the city transforms from a bustling trade hub to a sleepless furnace with a soundtrack of geckos and existential dread. The sun dips low, but the heat stubbornly refuses to leave. The air is thick, so dense you could almost chew it. By sunset, your wool uniform feels like a wet rag left on a bakery counter. Humidity rules the night, turning every breath into an exercise in patience and every shirt into a contestant for most likely to stick to your back forever. Locals seem immune, gliding past in airy fabrics, while you and your fellow VOC men sweat out enough salt to start your own spice monopoly. Inside your quarters, the air is even heavier. The walls trap the day's warmth like a cruel joke, and the beds, rough pallets if you're lucky, offer no escape. Windows are propped open to catch a breeze, but mostly they just let in more mosquitoes, carrying the gentle lullaby of malaria risk. Fans? If you have one, it's hand-cranked or wielded by a kid who expects a tip. Otherwise, your best bet is the ancient Dutch technique known as lying perfectly still and hoping to pass out from boredom. Outside, Batavia comes alive in ways that are equal parts charming and alarming. Lanterns flicker along the canals, casting wobbly gold on the water's surface. The sounds of distant laughter, the barking of stray dogs, and the shrill whistle of a night watchman mix with the ever-present chirp of geckos running across the rafters. The city never truly sleeps. There's always someone bartering, cleaning, or starting a card game that will last until sunrise. Of course, the real art of Batavian nights is the strategic nap. You learn early that sleep, like everything in the East Indies, is a negotiation. You take it where you can get it. A quick doze on a shady porch, a stolen hour before midnight, a hopeful 5 minutes leaning against a cool stone wall. The trick is to rotate your napping spots to avoid becoming the regular host for the city's population of ants. The humidity changes you. Your hair curls in strange directions. Your boots never quite dry. You invent new ways to cool off, damp towels, open wells, or simply standing in the rain and pretending it's a luxury spa treatment. If you're on night duty, you march slowly, using your lantern more as a fan than a light. The wise keep water by the bed. The foolish keep gin, only to regret it when the mosquitoes come calling. Even romance, for the ambitious or lonely, adapts to the climate. Love letters are short. Nobody wants to sweat over parchment. Affection comes in the form of sharing a shady bench or a mutual agreement not to mention body odor. The moon rises, the heat lingers, and even the rats seem to move in slow motion, as if conserving energy for tomorrow's chaos. Eventually, the city settles, sort of. You drift into a restless sleep, half listening to the city's nocturnal symphony, dreaming of wind, cool water, and a future where you don't wake up stuck to your own sheets. In Batavia, you learn to cherish every breeze, every patch of shade, and every successful nap. Sleep, like spice, is rare and precious, and if you find a moment's rest, hold on to it. Morning comes quickly, and so does the heat. If you joined the VOC dreaming of riches, you're not alone. The company's recruiters are masters of marketing. Tales of fortunes made overnight, gold piling up in Amsterdam, and sailors returning home to buy whole neighborhoods and retire early. The truth? You'll be lucky if you make it back with your shoes, a few teeth, and enough coins to buy a round of beer. Your paycheck, in theory, is a thing of beauty. A tidy sum promised in your contract, paid in sturdy Dutch guilders or, sometimes, whatever silver the company could scrape together from 3 continents. When you finally line up on payday, squinting in the tropical sun, you imagine yourself rolling in wealth, living like a king. Instead, you're handed a slip of parchment and a pouch that feels suspiciously light. The deductions start early and never stop. There's a fee for your uniform, which is already dissolving in Batavia's humidity. There's a charge for food, yes, even the ship's biscuit and salted beef that doubled as weapons. The company also subtracts the cost of medicine. See, the barber's leeches and pliers, gear lost to storms, fines for late paperwork, and mysterious spoilage fees that appear every time someone's pepper sack springs a leak. If you got sick, missed a shift, or misplaced a crate of nutmeg, there's a deduction for that too. Room and board? Not included. The company rents you a bunk in its own moldy barracks, then charges extra for the privilege of sleeping within mosquito distance of your fellow wage slaves. Even your hammock is technically company property. If you lose it, expect another fee. You try to keep track of your earnings. The clerks in the pay office, trained by the world's grumpiest mathematicians, are masters at making numbers disappear. You ask to see the records. They gesture to a stack of ledgers thicker than your sea legs. Every question is met with a new form, another signature, and the gentle reminder that complaining too much can earn you a spot in the worst work detail. Still, you manage to save a few coins, just enough to dream about. You consider sending money home, but the postal service is slower than a becalmed barge and only slightly more reliable. If your wages do arrive in Amsterdam, your family may receive a pouch of coins, a lecture from the local pastor, and possibly a note explaining why half your pay was withheld pending review. Nobody at home ever gets the whole story. Only rumors and whatever scraps you can cram into a letter. Some clever souls try to game the system. You might trade with locals, stash away a little extra from side deals, or barter with the ship's cook for the good dried fish. But the company watches everything. Surprise inspections are common. If you're caught with undeclared profits, the best-case scenario is a public scolding and the loss of your loot. The worst case involves stocks, whips, or a new posting somewhere even hotter and less forgiving. You hear stories of men striking it rich, buying canal houses, and retiring in luxury. Those men are rare, mythical creatures, like honest company accountants or beds without bugs. Most finish their contract with a bag of coins, a sunburn, and stories worth more than their savings. So where did all the money go? Mostly back to the company, a little to the barman of Batavia, and the rest lost to time, theft, and bad luck. If you're lucky, you return with your life, a few memories, and maybe, just maybe, enough silver to remind yourself you survived the world's richest, stingiest, most adventurous employer. Welcome to the paycheck. The greatest VOC mystery of them all. Romance on the other side of the world is never quite what the company chaplain promised. You arrive in Batavia with dreams of love. Fragrant flowers, moonlit walks along the canal, maybe a dramatic, windswept kiss beneath the palm trees. Reality is more complicated. Courtship in the VOC colonies comes with bureaucracy, sweat, and the constant, nagging worry that your new sweetheart might be carrying more than just a torch for you. Let's start with the obvious. The Dutch East Indies are home to a wild mix of people. There are fellow VOC men, pale, sunburned, and desperately lonely. There are local women, some born in Batavia, others drawn to the city by trade, promise, or the hope of a better life. There are Eurasian families, Portuguese merchants, Chinese traders, slaves, freedmen, and everybody's mother-in-law. If you want to find love, you'd better be ready to meet the in-laws, their goats, and a crowd of people who think you're making a very suspicious choice. VOC marriage is a paperwork event. If you wish to marry a local woman, you must first apply, yes, apply, for permission. The company will investigate her background, your salary, and your disciplinary record. You'll be interviewed by a supervisor, a chaplain, and, on a slow day, the chief clerk's cousin. There are forms to sign, contracts to notarize, and at least 2 witnesses who will later swear they never saw you before in their lives. Courtship is public, awkward, and endlessly commented on by your colleagues. Every walk is supervised, every gift is inspected, and every love letter might be read aloud at roll call, especially if you accidentally address it to the wrong Maria. Some men take local wives in the custom of the country, which is to say, without the company's paperwork but with the full gossip of the neighborhood. These unions are half tolerated, half frowned upon, and always the subject of rumors, none of them printable. If you're hoping for passion, you'd better enjoy the challenge. Privacy is as rare as a Dutchman with a full head of hair after the crossing. The heat means every embrace is sticky. The mosquitoes mean every moonlit meeting is interrupted by a slap. And the ever-present lice mean that, "Can I run my fingers through your hair?" is less romantic and more a sign of bravery or true love. Mixed marriages have their own challenges. Navigating languages, religions, and family customs you can barely pronounce. The wedding feast is a wild blend of Dutch, Malay, Chinese, and Portuguese dishes, with both sides carefully watching to see if you try the chili or flinch at the durian. There are moments of true tenderness, sharing water in the heat, laughing about mispronounced words, or helping each other through yet another paperwork debacle. Not every romance ends with wedding bells. Some are fleeting, some are affairs doomed by contracts, duty, or the call of home. Others bloom in adversity, outlasting gossip and company suspicion, finding small joy in the daily struggle of colonial life. But all have one thing in common: hope. Hope that you'll find someone who doesn't mind the sweat, the sunburn, or the company forms. Hope that love, even in the tropics, can outlast the gossip, the paperwork, and the occasional outbreak of lice. And maybe, if you're lucky, hope that someday you'll tell your grandchildren how you crossed oceans, defied company rules, and found something rare and stubborn: love in the East Indies, contracts and all. Life under the VOC is an endless list of rules. Don't steal, don't fight, don't nap on duty, and absolutely, under no circumstances, don't insult the captain's hat. But rules, like barrels, are made to be broken. And when they are, the VOC offers a range of creative punishments, painful, public, and just humiliating enough to make you think twice the next time temptation calls. The whip is the first and most dramatic option. The boatswain, usually a man with arms the size of hams and the empathy of a turnip, wields it with gusto. For major crimes, stealing food, mutiny, or questioning the ration of beer, the punishment is swift and theatrical. The whole crew gathers on deck, forming a tight ring of spectators. The offender's shirt is ripped off, the sentence is read, and the lashes are delivered with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for festival games back home. The first strike stings, the second burns, and by the third, you're promising to never look at a biscuit sideways again. For days afterward, your back tells the story to anyone who cares to look. But not every offense gets the whip. For lesser crimes, insolence, slacking, gambling debts gone wrong, the company reaches for the bilbos. These are iron shackles attached to a sturdy beam or post, designed to keep your ankles together and your shame public. Sentenced to the bilbos, you sit on the deck in the tropical sun, sweating and itchy, while your mates walk past, offering sympathy, mockery, or just trying not to laugh. It's the VOC version of timeout, except the ants are much more aggressive. Some punishments are financial. Fines for missing equipment, lost paperwork, or reckless hammock swinging. Yes, that's a real offense. The company is happy to dock your pay for nearly any reason. Every time you check your earnings, you discover a new deduction: disrespectful posture, improper shoe storage, suspiciously rapid biscuit consumption. There's even a standing fine for excessive complaining, which is enforced more strictly after storms and on particularly hot days. And then there's the punishment nobody wants: public shame. The captain is a master of the art. Offenders are made to stand at attention while their crimes are listed, loudly and in excruciating detail, to the assembled crew. Sometimes there's a scarlet letter pinned to your shirt or a sign hung around your neck: I stole cheese, I sang off, key, or the ever-popular I lost the ship's cat. Laughter is encouraged. You will never live it down, and you will definitely hear about it the next time you try to barter for someone's seat at dinner. Punishment is supposed to teach a lesson, and in the VOC, the lesson is usually don't get caught. Everyone knows someone who got away with something worse. Luck and timing are everything. A clever sailor learns how to blend in, how to keep his nose clean, and how to laugh when it's someone else's turn on the whipping post. Still, the punishments work. The fear of the whip, the misery of the bilbos, and the agony of public embarrassment keep most men in line, most of the time. And for the few who can't stay out of trouble, there's always another ship, another voyage, and a whole new set of rules to break. Because under the VOC, discipline is the one thing you can always count on. That, and the certainty that the next punishment will always be just a little more creative than the last. If you thought a long sea voyage with the VOC meant leaving your morals behind, think again. The company is as interested in your soul as it is in your spice quota. Welcome to religious life in the colonies. Part Sunday obligation, part community glue, and part ingenious method of keeping guilt levels high enough to discourage mischief, at least until Monday morning. The company's official religion is Dutch Calvinism, the faith of sturdy black hats, sober sermons, and the conviction that God is watching. And so is the company chaplain. Every settlement, no matter how sweaty or remote, gets its own church, complete with a tall steeple, a cracked bell, and enough hard benches to guarantee you'll never nap through a sermon in comfort. Services are mandatory. Missing one means a stern visit from the chaplain, followed by public prayers for your wayward soul and, if you're especially unlucky, a fine deducted from your next pay. Sunday in Batavia is the highlight of the spiritual calendar. The bells clang at sunrise, calling the community together. VOC men trade their sweat-stained uniforms for their clean shirts, only slightly less grimy than their work clothes. Everyone files in, sits ramrod straight, and prepares for a solid hour of fiery warnings about greed, pride, drunkenness, and the dangers of spending too much time near the Portuguese Quarter. The chaplain's sermons are legendary for their length and creative use of the word damnation. If you nod off, you risk a sharp elbow from your pewmate or a lecture about sloth. Some claim to have seen men converted out of pure boredom. Religion here is more than doctrine, it's a social event. After the service, you linger outside, catching up on gossip, arranging marriages, and bargaining over who has to clean the church next week. Rumors spread fast. Who skipped communion, who muttered during the prayers, who was seen sneaking a nip of gin before the bell. Church is the place to be seen, forgiven, and occasionally quietly judged. But for all its rules and rituals, religious life is a comfort. When storms batter the port or sickness sweeps the barracks, prayers are real and urgent. The chaplain makes the rounds, Bible in one hand, leeches in the other, offering hope, healing, or at least a sympathetic ear. Funerals are solemn and well attended. Baptisms are celebrated. Any excuse for a party. Marriages are complicated, usually requiring 3 witnesses, 2 forms, and at least one nervous parent glaring at the groom. Religion also crosses borders. The colony is a stew of faiths. Malays, Chinese, Portuguese, and freedmen all bring their own gods, temples, and festivals. Officially, tolerance is encouraged, as long as nobody forgets who's in charge. Off the record, everyone borrows a little from everyone else. Candles, recipes, lucky charms. The lines blur, and you find yourself asking both God and the local spirit for help when you lose your last bar of soap. But guilt is always close at hand. The chaplain reminds you weekly that wealth is dangerous, pride is a sin, and that only the truly righteous will see home again. You nod, promise to try harder, and then promptly forget everything as soon as the next round of beer is poured. In the end, religious life under the VOC is just like everything else. Structured, sweaty, occasionally inspiring, and always a little absurd. Whether you pray for gold, for forgiveness, or just for a decent night's sleep, one thing is certain: God may be merciful, but the company's bookkeeping never is. Your contract is up. Your last sack of nutmeg has been counted. You've survived the heat, the mosquitoes, the paperwork, and possibly even found love, or at least a lice-free bunk. Now, at last, you're going home, or so you hope. Because getting to the East Indies is one thing. Getting back to the Netherlands is an entirely new adventure, and not everyone makes it. In fact, the longer you think about it, the more you suspect the company designed it that way. Preparation begins with rumors. Word spreads that a homebound fleet is assembling. The docks erupt into frantic trading. Coins for sturdy boots, dried fruit for tobacco, promises for prayers. Everyone has a story about someone who tried to sneak aboard early and ended up scrubbing decks as punishment for a week. You pack your belongings, 3 shirts, a handful of coins, and that priceless souvenir you're convinced will impress everyone in Amsterdam. Spoiler, it's usually confiscated at customs. Then comes the medical check. The company wants to make sure you're healthy enough to survive the voyage, and not just a walking, talking bag of tropical diseases. The barber pokes, prods, and declares you fit, provided you're not already dead. Anyone who coughs a little too loudly is quietly sent to the convalescent quarters and usually replaced by a fresh recruit who doesn't ask questions. Departure day arrives. You board the ship with a strange mix of joy and dread. The homebound ship looks just like the one you arrived on. Cramped, creaky, and still smelling faintly of despair and onions. You find your hammock, stake your claim, and immediately start comparing notes with your new bunkmates on who's likely to get seasick first. Spoiler, it's always you. The voyage home is both familiar and worse. The winds don't always cooperate, and you spend weeks drifting in humid silence, longing for even the sound of the captain's lectures. The old enemies return, biscuit weevils, salt beef, the endless roll of the sea. Someone gets sick, and the barber is suddenly the most popular man on board, doling out medicine that tastes like regret. and burnt herbs. The cook experiments with dried fish, and the result is an aroma that seeps into your dreams. You talk, play dice, and retell every story of your time in the Indies, each tale a little taller than the last. Home seems closer with every sunrise, but so does another storm, another round of bad luck, or another officer with a suspiciously heavy clipboard. You watch the horizon for weeks, squinting for a first glimpse of the Cape of Good Hope and the halfway point to Europe. As you sail north, the weather changes. The sun loses its punch, your sweat finally dries, and your uniform begins to feel like armor instead of a torture device. The wind grows cold and sharp, and you find yourself longing for the humid nights of Batavia. Just a little. Finally, land appears. Amsterdam's spires rise out of the mist. The bells ring, families gather, and you step onto Dutch soil with legs that forget how to walk straight. You've made it. You're thinner, paler, and probably poorer than you expected. But you have stories, scars, and maybe a few peppercorns tucked deep in your pocket. Going home is never simple. But after months at sea, every muddy street, every familiar face, and every bite of plain Dutch bread feels miraculous. You survived the round trip. You've earned a rest. And with luck, you'll never see a ship's biscuit again, unless you really need a doorstop. You step off the gangplank onto the familiar, muddy streets of Amsterdam. Hair a little thinner, skin a lot tougher, and your memory bursting with stories. Now comes the most delicate job of all, deciding which tales of your VOC adventure to tell, and which to let sink quietly beneath the waves with your last pair of wool socks. The first rule of coming home is that nobody wants to hear about weevils. Instead, you tell everyone about the endless, sparkling seas and the dolphins that raced the ship at sunrise. You talk about palaces in Batavia, jungle nights full of moonlight and mystery, and banquets with sultans where every bite tasted like fortune. Your neighbors hang on every word, wide-eyed, picturing you as a dashing hero, a trader, a diplomat, maybe even a pirate. You don't mention the days spent doing paperwork in a warehouse that smelled like despair, or the endless lectures from the company accountant about proper nutmeg tallies. Every returnee knows. The best stories get better with every telling. That fever you barely survived? Now it was a duel with a giant jungle serpent, narrowly escaped thanks to your quick thinking and an improvised torch. The romance that fizzled after 2 sweaty walks along the canal? Now it was a tragic love story worthy of a song, with a princess waving her silk handkerchief as you sailed away. No one needs to know her father ran the local goat market. Sometimes it's the little details that stick. The taste of chili so hot you forgot your own name. The monkey who stole your hat. And, you swear, tried to barter it back for a dried fish. The thunderstorm that cracked the sky over Java, lighting up the ship like a lantern. Each memory grows brighter, shinier, more heroic. The Dutch winter seems dull and grey compared to the heat, chaos, and colour of the Indies, so you paint your past in even bolder strokes. There are darker tales too, but those are saved for hushed nights in the corner of a smoky tavern, long after the children have been sent to bed. These stories are laced with the truth. Shipmates lost to fever, the loneliness that crept in with the tropical rains, the moments of fear that never quite left. You share these only with other returnees, men and women who know that behind every legend is a pile of dirty laundry, a few scars, and a lingering cough that you hope is just the cold. Some stories grow into legends, tales of entire ships vanishing, haunted islands where the trees whisper in Dutch, barrels of pepper cursed to bring bad luck. The old-timers at the docks nod solemnly, adding their own flourishes. It's said that somewhere in the Indies, a sailor who laughs too loud at the company's expense will wake to find his hammock filled with ants, or that the ghost of a captain who lost his cargo still wanders the canals at night, searching for a missing invoice. With time, fact and fiction twist together like the smoke from your neighbor's pipe. You see yourself in every tall tale, braver, cleverer, a little luckier than you felt at sea. You tell the best stories, the funniest disasters, the victories and near misses, and people listen, laugh, and buy you another round. No one asks about the bilbos or the biscuit shortages. They just want to know what you saw, who you met, and how you survived. And so the VOC legends live on, told, retold, and improved each time, proof that even the hardest journeys can be transformed into stories that outlast the salt, the sweat, and the storms. You might think a VOC ship is too small and chaotic for pets, but you'd be wrong. No self-respecting trading vessel leaves port without a cargo hold full of livestock and a deck crawling with unofficial animal crewmates. On paper, pets keep spirits high and pests low. In reality, they're just as likely to steal your breakfast, bite your finger, or provide the only comic relief on a ship sailing toward the edge of the map. Start with the cats. The official company line is that cats are there for pest control, but everyone knows they're the real officers. Each cat stalks the lower decks, eyes narrowed and tail twitching, on an eternal quest to reduce the rat population. Most succeed, up to a point. Rats are canny, cats are lazy, and eventually a silent truce is reached. Rats stay out of the biscuits, cats nap on the captain's hat, and everyone pretends the scratching in the night is just the wood settling. Sailors swear certain cats bring good luck. Others are suspected of siding with the rats during hard times. No one trusts the orange one. Then there are the chickens. Essential, in theory, for a supply of fresh eggs and the occasional meat. In practice, they're feathered anarchists. By day 3 at sea, half have flown the coop, literally, sometimes overboard, and the rest have developed a sixth sense for hiding underfoot just as you're carrying something heavy. Their eggs are prized, fiercely guarded by the cook, and occasionally turn up where no one expects, like in your boot, or, memorably, floating in a barrel of brine. When a chicken gets loose in a storm, the whole ship unites for the only real group exercise they'll ever do, the Great Poultry Roundup, complete with shouting, slipping, and one very flustered quartermaster. Now, the real wild card, the monkey. No one quite remembers who brought it on board. Some say it was a bribe from a local prince. Others blame the last captain's questionable taste in mascots. However it arrived, it now rules the upper deck with a tiny iron fist. The monkey's hobbies include stealing hats, hurling biscuits at the carpenter, and inventing new ways to escape its leash. Some say it understands Dutch. Others claim it's secretly running a gambling ring with the ship's boy. Either way, you don't cross it unless you enjoy being the target of airborne banana peels. At night, the monkey curls up in the rigging, glaring down with the air of a small, furry admiral. Of course, animal life isn't all chaos. On bad days, a cat's purr is a comfort. On good days, the chicken's squawks drown out the quartermaster's complaints. When the ship is becalmed and the boredom turns poisonous, the monkey's latest antics are the only entertainment left. Sailors name their favorites, swear by their luck, and share the best morsels from their own rations, until a sudden peck or scratch reminds them where their loyalties truly lie. And, inevitably, animal drama reflects human drama. Disputes over who cleans up after whom, who gets the next egg, and whether the monkey should be allowed near the charts become hot topics of debate. Some believe the ship would fall apart without its menagerie. Others suspect it already has. But in the end, pets and pests alike are part of the VOC family. On a ship far from home, surrounded by water and uncertainty, a purring cat, a squawking hen, or a mischievous monkey is a reminder that the world is bigger and weirder than even the wildest company legend. There's nothing like a letter from home to remind a VOC sailor just how far away home really is. On the rare day the mail arrives, the entire ship buzzes with hope, dread, and the subtle art of pretending you don't care whether your name is called. Letters are treasures, fragile, faded, and usually smelling faintly of salt, mildew, and disappointment. Receiving mail at sea is an event, not a routine. Most letters have already traveled by foot, barge, packet boat, and the occasional stowaway's pocket before they even reach your port. By the time they're sorted by the VOC's cheerful, semi-literate clerk, months, sometimes years, have passed. News is always history, and sometimes family members mentioned in the opening lines are long gone by the time you read the last page. You gather with the rest of the crew, shuffling awkwardly as names are called out. Some familiar, others mangled beyond recognition. The lucky few are handed thin, folded sheets sealed with blobs of wax and bad grammar. Everyone else tries not to look too jealous. For those who don't get a letter, it's a quiet defeat, shrugged off with a joke about Dutch efficiency or a muttered promise to write home just as soon as the storms let up. The letters themselves are works of art, each a testament to the creativity of those left behind. Mothers scold you for forgetting to write. Wives update you on every cousin's wedding. Children send drawings of ships with more sails than sense. Some letters are a litany of woes. The cow got sick. Your brother owes money. And the roof leaks in 5 new places. Others are pure comedy. Neighbors eloped. The preacher fell into the canal, and your old dog has learned to bark in Portuguese. Still, even bad news is better than silence. You read each word carefully, tracing the lines with a calloused finger, savoring the bits of gossip, advice, and affection hidden between the complaints. A single letter can be read 100 times, passed around the hammocks, and memorized until you can recite every misspelled name and tedious weather report. Of course, by the time you finish reading, the mold has usually claimed at least one corner. Pages are mottled with stains, ink runs in strange directions, and there's always a faint tang of damp that refuses to leave. Some letters, sealed in tin or oilcloth, fare better. Others arrive as little more than a damp mystery, requiring translation, faith, and a good imagination to reconstruct the original message. Sending a letter home is an exercise in optimism. You write carefully, avoiding any mention of lice, whippings, or the time you nearly sank off Sumatra. Instead, you boast about your command of a ship, your excellent health, and how you're definitely not homesick. You fold the page, seal it, and hope it finds its way across oceans and bureaucracies. If you're lucky, it'll arrive before your next birthday. If not, your descendants may get a laugh from it in 50 years. The exchange of letters is more than just news. It's proof that you still exist somewhere outside the VOC. For a moment, the distance shrinks, the ship feels less lonely, and the world makes a little more sense. You tuck the letter into your jacket, safe against your heart and the mold. Because in a life ruled by storms, paperwork, and company rules, a letter from home is still the best fortune you can find. If storms, fevers, and the quartermaster's ledger haven't convinced you the VOC life is tough, just wait until someone yells, "Sail ho!" and it's not the friendly kind. Pirates are the wild card of every East Indies voyage. Less Jack Sparrow, more angry men with sharp objects and questionable hygiene. Company brochures don't mention them, but pirates are as common as weevils and far more unpredictable. The first sign is almost always the lookout's shout. Everyone drops what they're doing, usually a dice game or grumbling about dinner, and scrambles to the rail. On the horizon, a suspiciously fast ship approaches, its sails dirty and its intent obvious. The officers act calm, but the crew instantly divides into 3 teams: the brave, the cowardly, and the chronic complainers. Team 1. Run. The official company policy is to avoid a fight. If your ship is faster, unlikely, the captain orders full sail and everyone hauls lines until their hands bleed. The wind never seems to cooperate, but for a few glorious moments, you imagine yourself outpacing danger, a hero in a wool coat and 3-day-old socks. Sometimes you get lucky, the pirate loses interest, or their ship is older than your last pair of shoes. Other times, they close in, waving weapons and insults in 6 languages. Team 2. Hide. If running fails, hiding is next. You stash the valuables, pepper, nutmeg, the captain's emergency rum, in the cleverest spots you can find. False bottoms in barrels inside hollowed-out loaves of bread, or just under your bunk, which, ironically, is probably the first place a pirate will look. Everyone pretends to look busy, hoping the pirates are nearsighted and easily distracted. The cook starts whistling, the clerk invents a sudden interest in mending sails, and the ship's cat disappears entirely, siding with whoever looks most likely to win. Team 3. Complain loudly. This is the largest group. They aren't running or hiding. They're making their disapproval known to anyone within earshot. I told you we should have sailed north. Why don't we have more cannons? This never happened on my cousin's ship. Their logic is flawless. If you keep up a steady stream of complaints, maybe fate will get bored and move on. It never does, but you have to try. If pirates actually board, chaos reigns. There's a lot of yelling, waving of weapons, and occasional bravado from someone who's seen too many puppet shows about naval heroes. The VOC's defense strategy boils down to locking yourself below deck, guarding the pepper like it's the crown jewels, and hoping the pirates settle for something smaller, like the quartermaster's boots or a barrel of suspicious beef. Sometimes a deal is struck. The pirates take what they want, leave a few colourful threats, and disappear before company backup arrives. Afterward, everyone comes out, counting fingers, patting pockets, and swapping stories about how bravely they hid behind the water barrels. The captain writes a stern report, blaming the weather, the sails, and, if he can manage it, the last man to swab the deck. The real punishment is in the paperwork and the long retelling of who did what, especially the part where you personally stared down a pirate while crouched behind a chicken coop. Pirate encounters rarely end in glory, but they always end in stories. You survive, you grumble, and you learn to appreciate the quiet days. Because after one run-in with pirates, even company rations seem comforting. At least the biscuits never try to stab you. A VOC ship may run on wind and muscle, but it's steered by something far more unpredictable. Sailor superstition. When you're a tiny speck in a furious ocean, logic quickly surrenders to luck, omens, and rituals that would make a priest blush. Every crewman is armed with a personal arsenal of charms and beliefs, and everyone's convinced their magic is the only thing keeping the ship from vanishing into a watery grave. Take, for example, the business of setting sail. No ship departs on a Friday. Everyone knows that's begging for disaster. The ship's boy must sweep the deck backwards before leaving port, for luck, while the carpenter hammers a lucky nail into the mast and swears at anyone who even looks at it sideways. The cook never whistles in the galley. Whistling is said to call the wind, but on a ship, the wind arrives more like an angry debt collector than a gentle breeze. Then there are the charms. Some men tie bits of red thread around their wrists, a supposed guard against drowning. Others tuck a coin into their shoes, muttering a quick prayer to St. Nicholas, patron of sailors and men who miss their mothers. One old-timer wears a dried fish scale in his hat. He claims he's never been seasick, though no one sits downwind to confirm, but the real power lies in the ship's unofficial collection of relics. There's always a lucky cat, credited with keeping rats and bad luck at bay. Some ships keep an heirloom biscuit, uneaten, petrified, and passed down for years. No one is allowed to throw it overboard, lest they offend whatever ancient spirits protect sailors from starvation. And then there's the doll. Every ship has one, usually tucked away in a drawer or lashed to the rigging. A little stuffed figure with button eyes and seaweed hair, clearly handmade by someone who either loved or hated their craft. The doll's origins are always mysterious. Found floating at sea, gifted by a grateful islander, or smuggled aboard by the first mate's grandmother. The crew debates its purpose endlessly. Some claim it brings good luck. Others insist it keeps storms away. and a few are convinced it's the real captain, biding its time until the next mutiny. Superstitions aren't just about luck, they're survival tools. Before a storm, you'll see men rub lucky coins, mumble prayers, or slip into the hold to consult the doll. Nobody steps on the main hatch without knocking 3 times. If a rat abandons ship, everyone prepares for the worst. Half the crew prays, the other half packs. And heaven forbid you ever mention a certain Scottish lake monster at sea. The last man to do so ended up cleaning the bilges for a month. Of course, outsiders laugh, officers roll their eyes and threaten to confiscate the charms. But when the sky turns black and the waves start climbing, even the most skeptical captain can be found whispering a nervous rhyme into his collar. Nobody's really willing to tempt fate. Superstition shapes everything. How the crew sails, eats, and dreams. It brings comfort when logic runs out and helps the men believe they have some control over the wild, indifferent sea. You may laugh at the lucky sock or the creepy doll in daylight, but at midnight, with the rigging creaking and the wind howling, you'll reach for your own charm, just in case. Because at sea, it's not just storms or pirates you have to worry about. Sometimes, it's the things you can't explain, the curses, the charms, and that one doll with eyes that seem to follow you all the way to Batavia and back. If you think catching a cold is bad, try falling ill on a VOC ship. Here, medical care is a cross between a medieval torture chamber and a carnival sideshow, heavy on the drama, light on the actual relief. The company is happy to sail halfway around the world for cloves, but good luck getting them to send a competent doctor. Instead, your fate lies in the capable hands of the ship's barber, who knows 3 things: cutting hair, extracting teeth, and draining blood at the faintest sign of trouble. Let's say you wake up with a fever. First, you'll get advice, lots of it. Your bunkmate swears by chewing dried orange peel. The cook recommends saltwater gargles. The carpenter suggests sweating it out while mending sails in the Sunday. Everyone, regardless of their hygiene or literacy level, is suddenly a medical expert. If you're lucky, their remedies are merely useless. If not, you'll find yourself swallowing something described as the local cure and hoping it doesn't bite back. Eventually, you end up in front of the barber surgeon, a man whose apron is always stained and whose tools look like props from a horror play. His methods are simple. First up, bleeding. Doesn't matter what your complaint is, headache, sore throat, stubbed toe, he'll tie a rag around your arm and open a vein, solemnly explaining that all illness comes from bad humors. If you're feeling faint, congratulations, that means it's working. Next comes the leeches. They're stored in a little jar and are, allegedly, the latest thing in Dutch medicine. The barber applies them with a flourish, promising they'll draw out the poison and restore balance. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but they always leave a mark and a story. If leeches aren't available, you might be prescribed a mixture of vinegar, old beer, and hope. Recovery rates are not published. If your problem is more visible, say a boil, a rash, or a suspicious lump, the barber may break out his sharpest knife. Minor surgery is performed with no anesthetic beyond a swig of rum and 2 friends to hold you down. Afterwards, you're given a filthy rag to bite and a prayer that the wound heals faster than the next outbreak. Infections are so common they have nicknames, and every sailor can point to a scar or missing finger as proof that the cure can be worse than the disease. Sometimes, you get lucky. The fever breaks, the cough fades, and you return to duty, a little thinner and a lot more suspicious of orange peels. Other times, you're assigned light work until the next man falls ill, at which point your hammock is up for grabs. The ship's log lists casualties in tidy columns, but the crew remembers every man who left his mark, usually in blood or stories of miraculous recoveries attributed to rest and a positive attitude. Getting sick is more than a personal struggle. It's a social event. Everyone watches, whispers, and wonders if you'll pull through. Hope is rationed like salt, but so is dark humor. After all, if you survive the leeches, the bleeding, and the barber's advice, you can survive just about anything. So you soldier on, crossing your fingers, clutching your lucky charm, and avoiding the barber's gaze whenever possible. Because on a VOC ship, illness isn't just a setback, it's a reminder that some days, the cure can be almost as terrifying as the disease. So tonight, as you settle into your soft bed, with clean sheets, a pillow that doesn't double as a communal lice habitat, and the quiet hum of indoor plumbing, take a long, grateful breath for every comfort you've ever taken for granted. Because you've survived a day as a cog in the mighty VOC, a world powered by salt meat, paperwork, and the kind of teamwork that only develops when you're united by the constant threat of scurvy and mutual disappointment. You've woken up in a wooden coffin with sails, braved breakfast harder than philosophy, lost 3 games of dice to a rat, tried to file a complaint about the smell, learned the true meaning of company policy, and managed not to be eaten by a crocodile, at least not today. You've sweated in wool under the Java sun, made friends with a chicken out of sheer loneliness, and learned more about Dutch bureaucracy than you ever hoped possible. And even in the endless line for your paycheck, with mosquitoes feasting on your shins and your supervisor inventing new ways to fine you for breathing incorrectly, you kept going. It's easy to laugh at the past from the safety of a memory foam mattress, but every comfort, every quiet night, every pain-free molar and warm meal is built on centuries of stubborn, occasionally reckless, very human survival. People found hope in the worst food, friendship in the loudest snoring, and dreams of home in the oddest places, even if the only letter that reached them was mostly mold. So tonight, as you fall asleep, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to all the sunburnt, seasick, overworked, and surprisingly optimistic souls who came before you. They faced a world of endless sea, merciless bosses, and dietary choices that bordered on psychological warfare. And they got through it, one bad biscuit and one good story at a time. Because history may be gross, confusing, and slightly suspicious smelling, but it's also proof that people are resilient, hopeful, and just ridiculous enough to keep sailing forward, no matter what. Good night. And may your dreams be free of lice, paperwork, and tropical diseases. You've earned it.